everyone, and welcome. Here's what's happening right now. The accelerating trade war as Donald Trump announces sweeping auto tariffs.
This is the beginning of Liberation Day in America.
The steep impact and the new promises to the embattled sector.
The appropriate taxes are paid here in Canada.
Questions swirl over a previous role in an offshore corporate tax haven.
Goldberg is an anti-Trump hater.
Plus, the Trump offensive, faced with the full text of leaked war plans.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Well, Donald Trump came down hard on Canada's auto industry, announcing he plans to go ahead with a 25% tariff on all cars and light trucks not made in the United States, starting at 2.5% and escalating. Now, here's more of what the U.S. president said.
We're going to charge countries for doing business in our country and taking our jobs, taking our wealth, taking a lot of things that they've been taking over the years. They've taken so much out of our country, friend and foe, and frankly, friend has been oftentimes much worse than foe. And this is very modest. And what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff.
All right, well, Canada's promised to retaliate in kind, and the Liberal leader today also promised measures to help Canada's car sector with a $2 billion fund. CTV's Adrian Gobriel is in Toronto outside a Honda car dealership. And Adrian, these tariffs were anticipated, but surely employees in the auto industry still must be in shock over the fact that it's actually happening.
Yeah, we just heard President Trump use the word modest. I can tell you, Sandy, that many in the auto industry don't feel that these tariffs across the board are modest. Many concerned they could lose their jobs. And now with today's announcement, some of those layoffs could be imminent. Now, on the same day as U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff announcement, Mark Carney making an announcement today to fortify Canada's auto sector, rolling out a list of campaign trail pledges. They include a $2 billion fund to build a Canadian supply chain from raw materials to finished vehicles, build an all-in-Canada network for auto manufacturing components, maximize Canada's steel, aluminum, and critical minerals, leverage government funding to prioritize and procure Canadian-built vehicles. Sandy, it was just about a year ago. I was just north of Toronto at a Honda plant where they announced plans for an EV battery build site, all part of a end-to-end vehicle manufacturing sector here on Canadian soil. All of that is now on thin ice.
Yeah, you know, Adrian, probably hard to answer this question, but the promised help from the Liberals, how will it help the fragile industry, and can it help the fragile industry at this point?
Well, Sandy, I have been speaking with members of the auto community today, auto industry leaders. They say that layoffs are coming. However, a plan like we heard today could eventually bring some of those jobs back. Have a listen.
It's important that we start the scenario plan, and I thought that this was a helpful commitment from Mark Carney to help those conversations along. If the government of Canada is going to help in that transition, it's going to save existing jobs with existing suppliers, with existing automakers, and then, you know, maybe that's what the next 10, 20 years looks like.
Sandy, it's important to note as well that Flavio Volpe, who we just heard from, told me that he also had similar conversations recently with the Conservative Party of Canada.
All right, Adrian, there'll be a lot of analysis. Donald Trump threw out a lot of numbers as well, so CTV National News is looking into all of that. Now, Mark Carney was also dealing with controversy today. The Liberal leader was asked about his previous position with Brookfield, which is a global alternative asset manager, and the use of Bermuda as a tax haven. CTV's Judy Trin is in Windsor. And Judy, tell us about the backlash facing Mr. Carney now.
Sandy, Mark Carney really wanted to talk about the Liberal policy to protect the auto industry. Instead, he was pressed on his previous job with Brookfield Asset Management.
Look, I'm beholden to absolutely no one except to the Canadian people.
The job Mark Carney wants, to be Prime Minister, could be impacted by the job he had as chair of Brookfield Asset Management, where he managed 2 investor funds valued at $25 billion, registered in the tax haven of Bermuda. As Carney appeals to middle-class voters like auto workers, his opponents are using the information to try and undermine him.
He chose to register in another country to avoid paying those taxes. That's less money for healthcare, less money for seniors.
This 2023 report shows that a union from BC wanted Brookfield to issue a tax transparency report. They were concerned it topped the list of companies that avoided paying the largest amount of income tax. But Brookfield management recommended shareholders vote against it, saying it could force the disclosure of sensitive information about operations that could put the securities company at a competitive disadvantage.
You know, there's nothing illegal about this, but I think there's a significant public sentiment that this kind of thing is wrong and should not be allowed.
Carney also says his expertise in his old job will help him tighten loopholes to clamp down on corporations that want to avoid taxes.
I understand how the world works and the structure works, and have the ability to put in place all of the necessary rules to ensure that the appropriate taxes are paid here in Canada.
He says he knows how the world works. He knows how to make it work for him and against you.
On day 4 of the federal election, Carney will stop in 3 cities in southwestern Ontario: Windsor, London, and Kitchener, the manufacturing heart of Canada. Carney will continue trying to connect with workers while the opposition continues to try to paint him as an elitist. Sandy.
All right, CTV's Judy Trin. Let's tap into some analysis now from CTV chief political correspondent Vashi Kapelas. And Vashi, yesterday it was Pierre Poilievre in damage control over alleged interference from India in his leadership bid. And today it's Mark Carney over his role at Brookfield. Now, mixed reaction, as we heard at the end of Judy's report. Opposition plans to paint him as an elitist. Now, do you think that this could hurt his image?
I think the potential exists in the same way as it did yesterday for Pierre Poilievre, Sandy, as we were talking about yesterday during your show. And I think that for a couple of reasons, primarily because there is so much policy that both the Liberals and the Conservatives are announcing over the duration of this campaign that is somewhat similar in nature. So for a lot of voters, this will come down to the personalities at the forefront of those parties and the degree to which they believe in their leadership and their leadership attributes. So you can debate the merits of what was raised today or what was raised yesterday. But the very fact that those issues are being raised and that the leadership of each candidate is in question could potentially have an impact down the road during this campaign.
Okay, now you talk impact. I want to bring up India, which seems to be a common denominator for both the Conservatives and the Liberals. Yesterday, today we learned that MP Chandra Arya was barred from running for the Liberal leadership over his alleged ties to India. And yesterday it was the connection to the leadership bid for Pierre Poilievre. So talk to us about today's development.
So I've spoken to 2 people who are very familiar with the issue, both of whom have top security clearance, and they conveyed to me that essentially what was at hand or what played out was a trip that Mr. Arya took over the summer, and MPs are free to take those trips, to make those decisions, go anywhere they like. The fact that he met, as you can see in those pictures, with the Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Modi, at a time when tensions between our country were very great, where there were allegations, for example, that that government was somehow, through proxies here in Canada, involved in, for example, murder plots, and that those officials had been expelled from Canada. The fact that that meeting took place is what raised the ire of the party, and that he did not apprise the federal government of it. So that is the substance of why they made the decision that they made. He, of course, contends that that is not the case. He did nothing wrong, but that's where things sit at this moment, Sandy.
Okay, Vashi, thank you. Now, affordability and housing remain key election issues with voters. And today, the Conservatives were out the door early, sweetening the pot for seniors. And then the NDP joined in. CTV's Abigail Beeman is on this file and how the announcements measure up.
In his newly branded campaign plane, Pierre Poilievre touched down in La Belle Provence, visiting a prefabricated home plant to make campaign promises for seniors.
Seniors deserve security. And that's why I'm also confirming that Conservatives will keep the retirement age at 65.
Poilievre says working seniors will be able to earn an additional $10,000 tax-free.
I would like to continue to work after 65 few days a week.
He'll extend the deadline to close your RRSP from 71 to age 73. And he commits to maintaining the age people can access government benefits. It would stay at 65.
Now he's flip-flopping on it, and we know that that is a lie. He is going to attack seniors the way he did before.
New Democrats are promising to increase the guaranteed income supplement for seniors and calling out Poilievre for his previous support of a higher retirement age. While this seniors advocate says Poilievre's plan addresses a major fear of outliving retirement savings.
We've been advocating for this for almost 2 decades. This is the first time we've seen it introduced in a federal election. So this is a really positive move for seniors.
Tonight, Poilievre plans to unveil a specific platform for Quebec. Conservatives have struggled to make inroads in this vote-rich province in the last few elections, currently holding 9 seats with 78 up for grabs. Sandy?
Abigail, thank you. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was in Hamilton today laying out a plan to provide middle-class Canadians with some financial relief.
Let's target families that actually need relief, middle-class families, lower-income families.
Singh announced what he calls a middle-class tax cut. He also pledged to eliminate the GST on essentials such as home energy, cell phone and internet payments, and kids' clothing. The NDP estimates these measures could cost the federal government $10.4 billion and would be covered by the CRA enforcing corporate tax compliance. Now, as for the Bloc Quebecois, just a few months ago, things were looking pretty rosy for the Separatist Party. That is before Donald Trump launched his trade war against Canada. Since then, a surge of Canadian patriotism has shifted things in a major way. CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin now on the headwinds facing the Bloc. Geneviève.
Yes, Andy, the question is whether the threats from the U.S. could eclipse traditional campaign issues in Quebec. Stamped on the Bloc Québécois bus is the slogan, Je choisis le Québec, I choose Quebec. Still themes of the province's identity, nationalism, sovereignty, and language, at the heart of federal elections here for generations, are taking a back seat on the trail now.
For the time being, what we have at hand in front of us is tackling the intimidation being put into place by the American president.
In the fall, the Bloc seems set to make big gains in its share of Quebec's 78 seats in the House of Commons. But in the face of Trump's tariffs and annexation threats, the Bloc's poll numbers have dropped as Quebecers' Canadian pride has risen.
We went from a nationalist sentiment towards Quebec that shifted to a nationalist sentiment towards the federal government.
An Angus Reid survey last month found the number of Quebecers stating a deep emotional attachment to Canada grew from 30% in December to 45% in February. Now, Quebec did start far back in Canadian pride, but this is the highest jump of any province. Analysts say part of the sentiment is based on dollars and cents and concerns about how a more independent Quebec with sovereignist leaders in charge would fare.
What people are saying is that we must work with allies, and who are the closer ally for Quebecers? Well, they are Canadian.
The Bloc leader has been making the case that other federal leaders don't know enough about the sensibilities of Quebec.
My only purpose is to be the best possible voice for Quebecers.
But analysts say the challenge for the Bloc will be to sell a Quebec-first party in what may turn out to be a Canada-first moment. Sandy.
All right, Jen. A developing story to share with you now. Today we learned the identity of the so-called Buffalo Woman, the unidentified 4th victim of a Winnipeg serial killer.
Buffalo Woman has previously or positively been identified as Ashley Christine Shingoose.
The 30-year-old from St. Teresa Point First Nation was last seen in March 2022 near a Winnipeg homeless shelter. Convicted killer Jeremy Skibitsky told a courtroom at his trial that he met Shingoose outside the shelter and later killed her. Winnipeg police say the woman's remains were officially identified Monday by DNA found during the investigation at a local landfill. Coming up on the attack over leaked war plans.
Nobody's texting more plans.
I
know exactly what I'm doing.
The Trump team's defense strategy on a deepening controversy. More fallout today from that stunning national security blunder. The U.S. Defense Secretary sharing classified information about a military operation in a group chat with a journalist. Let's bring in CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon. And Joy, intelligence officials grilled again today, but this time after the Atlantic magazine publishes the full text received by Editor-in-Chief Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, he wasn't going to do that, right, initially, Joy? What changed his mind and what was in those texts?
Yeah, Sandy, look, make no mistake, Donald Trump's White House is in full damage control, shifting the blame, trashing that journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg, criticizing his past reporting, even calling him a Trump hater. He was added to this group chat by security advisor Mike Walls about military strikes against the Houthi rebels. Shocking details, Sandy, like targets, timing, when the bombs will fall. Now, the Atlantic consulted lawyers and decided to publish the entire chat, showing Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's text, because the Trump administration still insists there's no lapse in security, no one was in danger, raising huge questions about Hegseth's handling of national secrets and if he's even qualified. Now, here's what Pete Hegseth had to say.
Nobody's texting war plans. Well, I noticed this morning out came something that doesn't look like war plans. And as a matter of fact, they even changed the title to attack plans, because they know it's not war plans. There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information. You know who sees war plans? I see them.
All right, Joy, as you said, Trump administration scrambling to defend that leak. And how is that playing out at the hearing?
Oh, well, on Capitol Hill, it wasn't pretty, Sandy. Trump intelligence officials, Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe, they did the bob and weave, saying, yes, the conversation was candid and sensitive, but no, it wasn't classified. They're kind of towing the White House line. Now, some Republicans, like Secretary of State Marco Rubio, admit it was a big mistake, and Democrats, they want someone fired. One thing's for sure, Sandy, this national scandal is not going away.
For sure. Joy, thank you. Still ahead, bonus controversy at the Bay, taking stock of the backlash over millions of dollars for executives. Hudson's Bay is moving ahead with plans to wind down most of its stores without offering severance pay to workers. But the company plans to reward its top managers and executives with up to $3 million in bonuses. CTV's Heather Wright is in Toronto. And Heather, the legal proceedings continue today. What more can you tell us?
Sandy, Hudson's Bay was back in court today asking a judge to approve a restructuring agreement that would give it a short timeline to save the 6 stores that have so far been excluded from the restructuring plan. Various stakeholders, including lawyers representing some of the more than 9,000 employees set to lose their jobs, oppose this plan, which sets an April 7th deadline to repay senior lenders. Opponents to this proposal say it limits a viable path forward for the Canadian retailer, and it all comes as the company confirmed that rank and file workers will not receive any severance, while roughly $3 million has been set aside for retention bonuses to be paid to executives and managers.
These bonuses are, to some extent, a necessary evil in the sense that the natural inclination of most employees when they see that the ship is sinking is going to be to jump ship and to try and find jobs elsewhere. And the company really needs them, of course, to stay throughout the liquidation period to ensure that the liquidation is successful.
So while these bonuses are not uncommon, they aren't sitting well with some shoppers.
Well, I don't think that's right or fair. So they already have too much money probably in the first place.
It's not much different from what we hear a lot of the time, and it's very unfortunate.
While employees would have access to the Wage Earner Protection Program, those payments would not commence until all workers are laid off, and that could take months. This case will be back in court tomorrow. Sandy.
Okay, Heather, thank you. After the break, Cape Breton's campaign priorities. The noteworthy issues as our election coverage makes a stop in Sydney. Sydney, Nova Scotia is a scenic coastal city known for fishing, tourism, and manufacturing, along with other growth sectors like technology and renewable energy. Tonight, we focus on the concerns of residents who live there as voting day approaches. CTV's Paul Hollingsworth sends us a snapshot.
In picturesque Sydney, there's a clear appreciation for music, culture, and sports. People take pride in their way of life, which includes a steady tourism industry, thriving seafood and manufacturing sectors, and a strong tradition of post-secondary education. There's also always time for a fun night out. This is open mic night, an opportunity for the community to gather, belt out tunes, and chat about what matters most to them this election campaign.
Whether it's housing or just at the grocery store, groceries, that type of thing.
Pub owner Arden Mofford says tackling inflation must be the top priority post-election.
Everything costs so much more, and there has to be a threshold where our consumers are going to stop purchasing the products.
Products like his famed seafood dishes that he worries tariffs will significantly impact. For this nurse, there is one issue that takes priority over all others.
Canadians don't have access to the health care that they deserve.
Another hot topic, the Canada-U.S. trade war and a major threat that is lurking south of the border.
Trump?
Oh my gosh, it's managing Trump.
Donald Trump has sparked a reaction across the country. Patriotism is surging. Voters in Sydney say the winner of the next election must find a way to build even more unity across Canada.
I think it's great now that we've become more patriotic, and we should worship our country.
This voter served 30 years in the military and says the trade war and threat of Canada being a 51st state has reminded him that loyalty and service to his country are the things that still matter the most.
We have to step up again.
He says if the winner of the next federal election helps navigate Canadians through these troubled times, it would be music to his ears. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Sydney, Nova Scotia.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Your local CTV News is coming up, and we'll see you tomorrow, we hope. Have a nice evening. Bye for now.